Hello and welcome to the Beer Jerk Drink Along with me, Matt.
And me, Luke.
And we're here today drinking an IPA. Well, Luke's trying to drink an IPA, he's getting it all over himself.
Spilling it everywhere. It's a very well filled can.
Yep, so we are drinking Naked City from Slab Brewing in Tauranga. Now, Slab are a brewery that most of you may not have seen, as they're a brewery who really likes to focus on their local area. And it's kind of a, the classic homebrewing brewery origin story, right?
Yeah, so we love chatting to brewers and finding out the stories about how they started and got going, and there's always really interesting stories. And of course we write about the stories in our Beer of the Week emails every week. But there are some noticeable trends in how a lot of brewers get started, and it's almost a story as old as time, really. That a couple of mates brew beers together at the weekends, and then they think, well, people like our beers, we could sell our beers, and then they start selling the beers. And
yeah, so and that is the story of Slab. So two local Tauranga mates got back to their hometown after travelling around and drinking all the delicious beers around the world and in the UK in particular. Settled down, started homebrewing, and they decided to scale up. So they started brewing in a shed in Zach's new house. But to start out, they needed to pour a concrete slab to put all their brewing equipment on, which is where the name Slab comes from. So they poured the concrete themselves and got all the brewing gear on it, and Slab was born.
Yeah.
And so now they've scaled up. They've got a nice little brewery down in Tauranga, and they're kind of making a name for themselves with their cans.
They're big ass cans.
They're big ass cans, as they like to put on everything.
I think they're doing a bit less big ass cans now. I think this is one of the first ones that they've released in a normal human sized can.
But the big ass cans are big, like 973, so almost a litre cans of a bunch of their core beers. They do a stout, a hazy, a ginger beer, a lager in them. So you'll see them around. Really bright colours, so they really stand out. It's a cool format.
Yeah, nice point of difference. And it's nice to share a beer with friends. And sometimes you want to drink 2 or 3 beers yourself, so you can just about get through one of those big ass cans yourself. But I'm pretty happy to see that they're putting some beers in smaller cans now, just normal sized ass cans.
Well, it means we can fit it in the box for one thing.
There's no way we'd fit a big ass can in
it's just like
through the wheat box.
Too big to post. So which is why you're not drinking one right now. But what you are drinking is just a really nice classic IPA. So hopped with Motueka and Mosaic. So a mixture of that US and Kiwi influence. You've got some really nice kind of citrus, stone fruit, a little bit of a passion fruity note there.
Yeah.
And a kind of classic West Coast malt base. It's kind of got a bit more sweetness than a lot of the more modern, super lean IPAs tend to, but I think it does well for it, so it creates a little bit more balance.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit off trend for a lot of New Zealand IPAs and the beers that are more popular in New Zealand, which do definitely skew to being lighter bodied. And that's just a thing that's developed with some of the amazing IPA brewers in New Zealand over the last 10 years that have really led the way. Just the preferences of their brewers have been a less malty beer, lighter body, more hop forward. But that's not really the case in many other countries that do interesting craft beer. It's a brilliant New Zealand-centric thing, but as you say, when you go to the West Coast of America, where IPAs come from, you'll find that IPAs definitely do have more, more cereal notes in them. You've got biscuity, grain, bready, that sort of profile to them, which this one has, and it's a good, yes. Yeah, you can always open another tin. What are the negatives of not having a big ass can, I suppose?
Yeah. But I think that trend to lighter-bodied IPAs, you are seeing a little bit overseas, kind of alongside the hazy trend. People going for those stripped-back malt bases. Yeah,
and brute IPAs, of course.
Yeah, and cold IPA, and that kind of wave of the way things are going, which is nice in its own right. But it's really nice to have something classic like this as well. Those, as I said, Motueka and Mosaic playing really nicely there, giving you some really nice friendly hop characters. We won't go into the story of IPA for this video because if you're drinking a beer jerk box, I think there's a 99% chance that you know what an IPA is.
You probably know what an IPA is. And we actually don't put too many IPAs in our Beer of the Week boxes, just because you probably drink loads of them anyway. So on a Thursday night, it's nice to have a bit of a difference and try something else. But of course, we can't ignore IPAs. So when an interesting one does come along, or one that stands out in some way, or one that is just
Hard to get.
yeah, hard to get or limited, has a good story behind it. So yeah, while this beer is definitely not a revolutionary IPA and it doesn't have any gimmicks or bells and whistles, I just love that it's a bit of a classic IPA, and of course it's from Slab, and I reckon a lot of you might not have had a Slab beer before, so it's a good introduction as to what those guys can do. So do check out some more of their beers.
Yeah, and just a touchstone for a classic style. It's an IPA, as Luke said, no bells and whistles, just really nicely done. The hop character shines through. It's balanced with malt. It's got a good level of bitterness, but it's not trying to be anything other than just good, solid beer. And sometimes it's not all about the latest gimmick and the latest fad following trends. It's good to come back to the classics.
It really is, and especially when you come to styles that are really popular these days with craft beer fans like yourselves. And I suppose imperial stouts, IPAs, kettle sours, and generally brewers often can't help themselves but add different adjuncts and different things to them. We've been guilty of that.
I feel attacked.
And the classic example that we see these days is it's hard to get a normal stout, or a normal imperial stout especially, that hasn't got adjuncts or hasn't been in barrels. And the same to an extent in this very, very crowded market where all these brewers are trying to make an IPA that's got something different to it. It's a bold move to make just a really lovely classic IPA.
Yeah, and so good on you, Slab.
Yeah. Well, cheers everybody. Hope you enjoy this week's beer.
Yeah.
See you next time.
See you next week.
It's unlucky to choose an empty glass.